Hi, I'm Portia Jackson Preston, and I am here today to talk to you about how to practice mindfulness around your media intake. And my goal is to help you to be informed, but also to be able to deal with feelings of overwhelm when they arise. And I find in my experience that by being more intentional about my media intake, I am better able to protect myself. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I can definitely say that as a public health professional, I felt an obligation to be informed. And what that often meant was that I was checking the news cycle far more often than was actually productive for me. And it took some time for me to actually slow down and embrace some of the tips that I'm sharing with you today. And at the time of recording this video, we are about a week past the election cycle. I've noticed a lot of people are moving from this point of wanting to be plugged into the news every single moment to now realizing I need a little bit more self-care and I need to step back a little bit. I actually just recently ran across a study that was published last month that talked about cardiovascular disease related hospitalizations and how they increased for events like heart attacks and strokes. And so I share that information not to scare you, but to empower you and to say that stress really does have an impact on our health. It is one of the contributing factors to cardiovascular disease related events. So I really just want to give you an opportunity to arm yourself with some information that might help you better deal with stress while staying informed. So as I mentioned, my personal goal is to be able to balance my need to be informed with also being able to manage feelings of overwhelm so that I don't feel carried away or depressed or overly excited as a result of the news cycle, because as we all know, it's ongoing and it can be very difficult to unplug yourself. So I'm going to share with you a few tips that I've come up with. The first thing is to figure out why. Why am I looking into the news at this moment? Do I have a job that requires me to be on top of the news every single hour? If you do, that is understandable, and I want to address that first. If you are in a profession where you are literally helping to produce the news, there is possibly different techniques that would be helpful to you in being able to maintain an even keel. The purpose of this video is really directed towards people in the general population who are feeling a pull to be informed all of the time and maybe not really know how to manage that. So again, am I intentionally going in to get this news because I need to be informed, or is it more habitual? You may have seen other sources talk about this idea of getting a dopamine rush every time that we check the news. And so we just keep going back and checking for more and for more just to see if something changes, because maybe there was that time where we checked it at the beginning of the day and we found out something that was really interesting or that we needed to know. So now we have this constant idea of I need to check it every single day when I first get up. So if that is the case, then I would recommend setting your routine for when you check the news. As I mentioned, I've come to this conclusion after experimenting on myself. And at the beginning of the pandemic, it was not unheard of for me to check the news several times per day, even within an hour. And I progressively worked my way up to having a set time of day that I would look at the news, because I realized that a lot of the times the news didn't actually change very much and I was often reading the same stories. So I definitely benefited from knowing I will check the news at this time. And now that we are probably 6 or 7 months past that point, I actually can say that I generally check the news every day, but I have some days where I do not check, and that works very well for me. It's been a long road for me. I actually taught health policy up until a few years ago. So I was very accustomed to constantly checking the news, and I've really had to wean myself off of that. So again, figure out why you're checking the news. This is a good reason for me to plug in. Would it benefit me more if I had a controlled frequency with which I am going to check the news? How often I'm going to go in? And then how often am I going to stay? Do I need to listen to this for an hour, or is 10 minutes enough? Is 5 minutes enough? Do I want to set a timer just to kind of check in on myself and see how I'm doing? Look at the frequency and the duration with which you are checking the news. The third thing that I want to talk about is the source that you are using. So I don't want to tell everyone that what I'm doing is ideal for them, because again, there's so many different outlets out there. And I think that it's important to make sure that you are looking at verifiable sources, sources that are held accountable for checking their information. So for me personally, for national news, I tend to use NPR news. And this is a recent switch for me. I do use other sources, but they were often very overwhelming for me, and I just needed a cleaner, concise display of the pertinent information I needed to know. And then from there, if I'm looking for more information, if I'm looking for a more international perspective, I will check other sources. So I would say that you want to really think about, am I getting prompted to look at the news because a notification has come to my phone or to my watch or to my desktop? Am I looking at news solely through the lens of social media? If it's either of those two, I would encourage you to find another source that you proactively go into. As I said, a reputable news organization, I highly recommend. I've also heard good things about Axios and Reuters, as well as AP News. I also benefit from looking at sources that have longer form analysis. So what this means is they have taken time to follow a story over a couple of days and really created insightful analysis, so that by the time I read it, I am getting something that's pretty well thought out and developed, rather than just reading the same news with little updates every couple of hours. So on the weekends, I tend to gravitate towards reading a newspaper or a magazine such as The Atlantic. And again, I'm not prescribing the sources that you should use. I'm telling you about some of the ones that I have found benefit in using. Okay, so before I go in for the news, I think about being present. Where am I at right now? Am I in a good place to take in this information? Let's say perhaps I'm scrolling social media and something comes along my feed that's pretty disturbing. Do I want to know more about this right now? Or should I take a few minutes and then read up on this another time? I don't want to have my head in a hole. I don't want to be uninformed. I just want to be able to empower myself to choose when is a good time for me to be informed. Does this always work perfectly? Absolutely not. But sometimes I can get the instinct that something is happening that I need to be made aware of, and then decide how I want to expose myself to that information in more detail. So I would say that before you check the news, make sure you're being present, note what your feelings are, and make sure you're ready to proceed. And if you're not, be intentional about taking care of yourself so that you can eventually go in and get the information that you need to know. While I'm checking the news, during your time period that you're reading the news, check in with yourself again. How am I feeling? Just acknowledge those feelings for yourself. Do I need to pause for a moment? Do I need to stop? Or do I need to look into a different source and get more information? I'm not encouraging you to fall down a rabbit hole, but sometimes one story doesn't have all of the details we would need. And so we think about, okay, well, where else do I want to go and read more about this? Or have I read enough to be informed? Afterwards, you want to think about what now? Now that I have this information, does this change something that I was thinking about? Do I have more information to make a decision? Is there an action that I want to take? Or am I feeling deeply affected by this? Do I need to talk to someone? And I think it's really great if you already have a list of people that you know that you can talk to. And I like to, if I can, check in with the person and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this. Are you okay discussing it? I can tell you that I felt a need to protect myself greatly in the week after the election, because there were still so many questions that I was personally sifting through. There was a little bit of shock for me because I didn't really know how things were going to turn out. And I just wasn't ready to have conversations yet. And I had to be okay telling people that. And sometimes it came off a little bit awkward because I didn't necessarily want to shut them down, but I knew I wasn't ready to have that conversation. So I personally think it's a good idea, if you're going to check in with someone when you talk about the news, just make sure they're in a good place to do that. And I think over time, you know who the people are that you can go to and have these conversations with. So I would recommend also just taking a moment to pause and reflect, just see where you're at. What do you need now? I can say for myself, the reason I taped this video today is that I heard a lot of news this morning that I wasn't prepared for. And it just happened to be that I was in the car, and I keep my car on NPR whenever I'm not playing something on the radio intentionally. It just seems to default back to that channel. And so I was dealing with this information, and I realized that it began to color the way that I was living my day. And I thought, I'm not even upset at anyone. I just received information I wasn't prepared for. And taking time to just note how I felt allowed me to take care of myself and get back into a better place so I could have a good day. So some of the things that you can do to take care of yourself, one is just taking a moment to step outside, take a walk, and just acknowledge how you feel. I think for me, sometimes just that validation and acceptance of how I'm feeling helps out a lot. Not judging myself for that. The second thing I did was I checked to see what my physical reactions were, and I realized that my neck and my shoulders were tense. So just taking a moment to relax them. And the third thing that I will mention to you, beyond taking a deep breath, just where you are, that's a really good immediate strategy you can always use. Just taking a few deep breaths, counting to 10, but you also can do some stress management relaxation techniques. And I do have some videos that you can watch that will help you with that. And lastly, of course, if you need to develop a self-care plan so that you know how to care for yourself when things come up that you're not necessarily sure of how you should feel or deal with. So I hope this video gave you some ideas of how you can deal with the news cycle. I am very interested to know how you feel about this information, what might be of use to you, and what you'd like to hear more about in future videos. Thank you for your time. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you again soon.